When we think about sports, we usually think about the athlete preparation. But how do you prepare for the games?
Well, there's actually quite a lot of preparation. We have to plan out things like the supplies. We have to liaise with the Olympic Association here and the various federations here. There are things like athlete medicals that have to be done, medicals for officials traveling as well. Um, we have to do stuff to link up with the organizing committee of the games. So things like, say, when I'm getting supplies, I can't just turn up with the supplies. I have to give them notification as to what we be bringing into the country. There are customs forms and procedures that have to be followed. So there's quite a bit of stuff that goes on. Right now, my email is full of documents that the organizing committee and the Olympic Association have sent to me that I have to read and go through and make sure that our team is compliant with before travel. And this current Olympic Games with the global pandemic going on, there's a bit more than usual, a bit more in the mix than we normally have.
I noticed you said we when you were talking
Yes.
about the preparation. Who are some of the other medical persons that will be there for the team?
Okay, so for us, ideally, when I say us, I mean our delegation. Ideally, like a medical team that includes a physician, a physiotherapist, and a a massage therapist. That would be our normal plan for a team to have at least a three-member team or team represented by at least three of those disciplines. Games with bigger participation or larger delegations, you might have in those categories, you might have more people. So sometimes you might have two physios or two massage therapists or two doctors, that sort of thing. But we ideally would like a representation from each of those categories. The current plan is to have, with this present team size, to have a doctor, a physiotherapist, and a sports massage sports massage therapist present for our team, our medical team.
In a perfect world, with a perfect budget, what else would you
Mhm.
want for your medical supplies or just to have for our athletes?
Well, I think in a perfect world, what we would want is that our athletes would be able to have the sort of support that we tend to be able to give them at games outside of games. That would be the perfect world, the utopia for us, so that our national athletes wouldn't necessarily have to wait to a big games to have physiotherapy support or a sport physician there for anything going on. I think that would be the ideal, that athletes would be able to go and train and be able to have massage services at the ready and not just wait for a big games to come up. So
Right.
that would be the ideal. We are trying to move closer to that. So the Sports Medicine Association, the Olympic Association, and the Ministry of Sport via the Sport Council
Right.
have put together a program that will allow our nationally funded elite athletes to get some medicals yearly that have nothing to do with whether there's a games or not. That they can get some comprehensive yearly medicals, physical, bloods, any imaging studies necessary, ECGs, that sort of thing. And that's a proposal that we've been working on for a while, and it has been approved.
Right.
And that's something that we'll be looking to do. right? So we'll be looking to move in that direction.
That'll be fantastic. Let's go back to COVID. You mentioned it earlier. What is your job, God forbid, if an athlete tests positive for COVID?
Okay, well, it would be for myself to liaise with the Japanese authorities, the public health officials.
Right.
But in fact, I will rewind first and they say it depends on where, right? If so, we have to do a bunch of tests before we even embark on our flight into Japan. So if an athlete was to test positive for COVID here in Barbados, then I would liaise with our authorities here. The person would do what we do here, which is they would go into isolation, and then we'd be praying that they would have a uneventful course, and we would see if their quarantine and their isolation time finishes in a time frame that might still allow them, let's say, to compete. If, however, everything is negative and we all reach Japan, one of the things that happens is on arrival, you get tested. And if you are to test positive, they do a confirmatory test at the airport again. And if that is positive again, then you go to the Japanese version of Harrison Point and you get isolated there. My job then would more be liaising with the authorities and checking up on the health of the athlete or the official, because it's not just the athletes, it could be the team officials as well. If it's during the course of the games, so we've passed all those hurdles, we've reached the village, and the games are starting. The current plan is that active competing athletes are going to get tested every single day. Thankfully, because I know people who've been swabbed, imagine getting swabbed every day. Thankfully, the daily test is going to be a saliva test, and the swab test would only be brought in for confirmation of a result. But they're going to get tested every day. If they test positive, then they get the nasal PCR swab. And if that's positive, same story again, Japanese version of Harrison Point, and then I liaise. Where it would really come in is when we as a delegation are getting ready to leave Japan and the games are over, and we have to get tests in order to travel, to leave and come home, and we are supposed to transit through the US. And if an athlete was to test positive and therefore have to go into isolation in Japan, one of the medical team, and in this case, by default, myself, would have to stay behind until the athlete has been cleared to travel. So I would stay behind and liaise with the health authorities. So that would be my role. Those are my roles, depending on where along the train this thing happens.
Right. That's very comforting to know that the athlete wouldn't be left behind all by themselves. So that's very comforting to know. The big fat elephant in the room right now is the pandemic, but normally the elephant in the room is performance enhancement drugs. What is
Yes,
your
indeed.
role if someone gets tested positive for performance enhancement drug?
Okay, well, let's again depends on where, right? Where and what the time frame is. So normally before any of our major games, we get a lot of the athletes get tested. I can't really say it's a random test because we know they're going to games, but depending on the size of the delegation, the tests within the delegation might be random. If a small delegation, you might just test all. One of my other hats is I am involved with the regional anti-doping organization, the Caribbean RADO, and I'm on the National Anti-Doping Commission board. and I'm a doping control officer as well, both. But as the team physician for, and the chief medical officer for a team, I do have to remove myself from that a bit, in that I try not to know when the testing officers are coming and if, and that sort of thing. But our general practice in Barbados is to get as many of the athletes tested before we leave. Now, when we get to the games themselves, obviously, unfortunately, if somebody was to test positive, they would have to withdraw from the games unless they're able to put in a very rapid appeal. Our general policy is that if an athlete has been called for testing, the athlete must or should be accompanied by someone. If I'm available, so say I'm at the venue or it's in the games village and I'm there, that it should be myself or a member of the medical team. If I'm not, maybe I'm at a different venue or something like that, then the athlete should go in with their coach or their manager. So they should never really be going for tests on their own.
Right.
That's to make sure you have somebody else ensuring that the correct procedures have been followed and that things are being done properly. Again, if somebody was to test positive there, unfortunately, you'd be looking at the person having to withdraw or appeal. And I would have to then assist that person in intervening or seeing if were correct procedures followed. Does this person have a really good reason why the anti-doping authorities should not prosecute and so on like that? Then that's where we'll have to come in. And if I could rewind all the way back to the beginning, one of the other things we tried to do from in fact, months ago, the federations would have been asked to have all the athletes submit any medications and supplements that they were on to the BOA in the earlies, so that I could have a look at them and see if anything runs afoul of the rules. And also if anybody needs what's called a therapeutic use exemption. And what that is where an athlete gets permission to use a medication that would normally be prohibited. And there's a special form and a process for doing that. And you're really supposed to do that process before the games and before you compete, and not compete, test positive, and then say, oh, this is my medication and I was really supposed to use this for my whatever. It really is something that should be done before, and that is something that I would facilitate or assist with.
You have a very big job. Good luck with it. Thank you very much, Dr. Ward.
Thank you very much. You're very welcome.